The forest was alive with secrets. At the break of dawn, a thin veil of mist clung to the old-growth pines that guarded the heart of Wyoming. Lauren McKay, 32, trudged alone along a barely marked trail, boots crunching over last year's needles, the chill biting through her uniform jacket. There was a wildness in these woods that even time couldn't tame, and Lauren, head ranger, survivor, loner, moved through it like she belonged, because she did. Lauren's hair, the color of wheat in summer, was pulled tight beneath her ranger cap. Sharp green eyes scanned the undergrowth. Most folks in these parts knew her as the McKay girl, the one who could outshoot, outride, and outlast any man. Her family's roots ran deep here. The scars ran even deeper. Every step in these woods brought a memory. Her father's heavy hand on her shoulder, her mother's laughter at a campfire, her little brother's face, gone now, lost to a moment's mistake on a hunting trip that haunted every patrol she walked. Today the air felt different. Something was off. The birds had gone silent. Lauren paused, senses sharpened, her hand drifting to the rifle slung at her back. She listened. There, a desperate, ragged whinny echoing from somewhere beyond the ridge. Her heart hammered. Wild horses were a legend here, ghosts more than fact. But Lauren knew the sounds of pain. She moved quick and low, weaving through aspen and bramble, boots slipping on moss-slick rock. The cries grew louder, frantic. Somewhere below, something struggled for life. She found the ravine by instinct. It was an old wound in the earth. Stones tumbled where spring floods had carved deep. Down in the tangled shade, a young Mustang foal, barely more than a colt, thrashed beneath a snarl of fallen branches. Blood streaked one flank. The foal's chest heaved, wide eyes rolling white with terror. Worse, a ring of gray shapes prowled at the edge of the gully. Wolves, half a dozen or more, eyes gleaming, hackles up. They circled with patient hunger, lips curled, bodies bunched for the charge. Lauren's skin prickled. She measured the distance, the slope, the cover. No backup, no radio signal down here, just her rifle, and whatever courage she had left. She sucked in a breath. Her mind flicked through options: run for help, fire a warning, distract the pack, or risk everything for the foal. Hesitation was death. She knew that. Still, memories surged. Her brother, broken and still, the helplessness she'd sworn never to feel again. She lifted the rifle, bracing against a trembling branch. The barrel caught the morning light. Crack! A shot ripped the silence. Startled, the wolves flinched, scattering back into the brush, teeth bared, eyes locked on Lauren now. She chambered another round, yelling, "Get away! Get out!" But the wolves knew the score. They were hungry. She saw it in their eyes. They weren't done yet. Moving fast, Lauren slid and tumbled down the slope, mud streaking her uniform. She nearly twisted her ankle, but adrenaline drove her on. The foal shrieked as she crashed through the brush, its legs tangled and bleeding. Lauren threw her rifle across her back, hands working at the branches, snapping, pulling, fighting to free the animal. Its breath was hot on her arm, panic wild. The wolves regrouped, sliding closer, muscles rippling under gray fur. One, the alpha, broad-shouldered and scarred, crept forward, testing her resolve. Lauren glanced up, sweat in her eyes. She grabbed a fallen limb and swung, roaring, "Back off!" And for a heartbeat, the wolf hesitated. The others slunk around, seeking a flank. With a grunt, Lauren hauled the last branch free. The foal tried to stand, legs trembling. Blood oozed from a gash on its hindquarter. She knew she didn't have much time. Her thoughts raced. Should she try to carry it? Let it? Leave it? She looked at the ravine wall, steep, slick, but climbable. The wolves snarled, growing bolder. She didn't run. Instead, Lauren wrapped her arms around the foal's chest, heart pounding, the animal's wild heartbeat thundering through her. She hoisted, muscles screaming, lifting the trembling body onto her shoulders. The foal was heavier than she'd guessed, legs kicking, blood dripping onto her back. The wolves moved as one, closing in. Lauren turned, stumbling up the slope, the foal's breath warm on her neck. Dirt crumbled under her boots, hands clawing at roots, dragging herself and the foal higher. Below, the wolves surged, snapping at her boots, teeth flashing. Lauren twisted, swinging her boot, yelling, "No!" and caught a wolf on the muzzle. It yelped, leaping back. Another lunged, but she jabbed at it with an elbow. The pack pressed, relentless. Lauren's chest burned. She kicked loose stones down, forcing the wolves to dodge. Her mind screamed, "Don't stop!" but her body threatened to fail. She could taste blood, metallic and sharp, from where she'd bitten her lip. Reaching the top, Lauren staggered, nearly dropping the foal. She spun, rifle raised, firing another warning shot into the air. The echo shattered the morning. The wolves scattered, fading into the trees. For now. Lauren collapsed, breath ragged, the foal curled against her. She looked into its eyes, terrified, pleading, alive. She realized her own hands were shaking. The forest felt bigger, darker, filled with dangers she couldn't see. She stood, cradling the injured foal, looking for a way forward. Behind her, the wolf pack regrouped in the shadows, eyes glinting with hunger. In that wild silence, Lauren knew she would have to risk everything. Flee and the foal would die. Fight and maybe both would survive. There was no turning back. Lauren's muscles burned as she shifted the foal's weight across her shoulders, sweat slicking her brow despite the evening chill settling in the Wyoming forest. The foal whimpered, small hooves scraping her back, its blood dripping onto her jeans with every shaky step. Behind them, the wolf pack emerged from the underbrush, dark shapes slipping through the fading light, eyes reflecting something primal and merciless. The growls felt closer, sharper, more determined. She couldn't outpace wolves in open country, not while carrying an injured foal. Her mind scanned the landscape, grasping for a memory. Then, there, through the trembling aspens, she glimpsed the skeletal outline of a log cabin, old, half-rotted, but real. Her family had used it long ago as a hunting outpost, and if she remembered right, it still had 4 walls and a stove. Panic threatened to choke her. She gritted her teeth, forcing her legs to keep moving. Branches whipped her arms, tearing her sleeves. The foal made a pitiful noise. Lauren whispered, "Almost there. Almost," trying to calm them both. A wolf barked, and she heard claws scrabbling on stone. They were gaining. She reached the porch just as the first wolf lunged from the shadows, jaws snapping inches from her boots. Lauren twisted, using her last strength to shoulder open the door, then slammed it shut behind her. The wolves crashed against the wood, snarling, paws thumping. She fumbled for the iron latch, breathing, "Come on, yes," and secured it just as something heavy hit the boards outside. Inside, the cabin was nothing but darkness and the lingering smell of old wood smoke. She slid to the floor, gasping. The foal collapsed beside her, legs splayed, sides heaving. For a moment, everything was silent except their breathing and the pounding in her ears. Lauren crawled to the fireplace, hands shaking, searching for tinder. Her father's lessons echoed, "Keep dry matches in the chimney." She found the tin box, struck a match, coaxed a tiny flame into life. Soon, firelight danced across the log walls, throwing the shadows of wolf snouts and clawing paws that pressed against the door. The wolves circled, frustrated, testing every weakness. She heard them scratch and whine, jaws snapping at the cracks. The foal shivered uncontrollably. Blood oozed from its hind leg, matting the soft brown fur. Lauren dug through her first aid pouch. Gauze, antiseptic, vet wrap. Her hands worked with practiced speed, cleaning the wound, pressing the gauze against the worst of it. The foal jerked, eyes wild, but she murmured, "Easy, easy," her voice steady, forcing calm she didn't feel. For an instant, she remembered her brother, his laughter, the way he'd trusted her in the woods. The memory burned. Lauren pushed it aside. She couldn't afford to lose focus now. Outside, a wolf howled, long and low, the sound rolling through the trees. Others joined in, a chorus of hunger and anger that rattled the window panes. The fire crackled, shadows twisting. Lauren dragged an old table and chair in front of the door, adding a battered trunk for good measure. The foal trembled, eyes rolling with fear. Lauren placed a hand on its neck, feeling its heart gallop beneath her fingers. She whispered, "You're okay. I've got you," over and over until her own fear ebbed. She checked the fire, fed it with splinters and kindling. Warmth crept through the cabin, thin but real. Time slowed. Every minute felt stretched, the howls outside a constant threat. Once, a wolf leaped against the window, teeth flashing, but the old glass held. The foal nickered softly, pressing closer to Lauren's side. She used her radio, but there was only static. No signal this deep in the woods. She was alone, with a wounded foal, ringed by wolves, no help coming till morning at best. The fire burned low. Lauren searched the cabin, finding half a can of oats, a battered saucepan. She heated water on the stove, stirring in oats to make a mush. The foal sniffed at it, lips twitching, and Lauren smiled. "That's it. Eat a little," as the foal took a few bites. Every swallow was a victory. She checked the wound again, cleaned and rewrapped it, making a sling out of an old shirt to help support the leg. The foal's eyes drooped, exhausted. Lauren brushed its mane, voice gentle, "You're safe now. For tonight." Outside, the wolves never relented. They prowled around the cabin, bodies brushing against the walls, occasionally yelping in frustration. Lauren could feel their hunger in her bones. Her mind flashed to old stories. Wolves breaking through doors, clawing through windows. She checked the barricades again, nerves taut. The fire was almost out. She broke up an old chair to keep it going. Then, a new sound. A deep, echoing whinny from the darkness beyond the wolves. Something powerful moved through the trees, hooves pounding earth, scattering undergrowth. The wolves quieted, uneasy. Lauren crept to the window, peering out. There, lit by moonlight, stood a massive wild Mustang stallion. He was slate gray, with a mane like tangled silver, eyes reflecting firelight. He reared, pawing the air, trumpeting a challenge that shook the trees. An ancient, primal sound. The wolves froze, heads low, tails between their legs. The stallion charged the edge of the pack, teeth bared, hooves lashing. A wolf yelped, retreating. The others melted into the shadows, wary now, circling at a distance. The stallion didn't leave. He patrolled the clearing, nostrils flaring, snorting his challenge. Lauren watched, heart in her throat, as the Mustang stood guard, protector, sentinel, wild king of these woods. Inside, Lauren settled beside the foal, exhaustion threatening to pull her under. She fed the fire one last time, checked the bandages, and finally let herself rest, knowing that for tonight, at least, they were not alone. The night dragged on in fits and starts, every sound magnified by exhaustion and uncertainty. Wind rattled the cabin's loose boards. Embers glowed red in the old stone fireplace, casting flickers across the battered floor. Lauren McKay, stiff and sore from hours of tension, sat with her back against the wall, her eyes never straying far from the foal huddled at her side. The young Mustang's breathing was shallow but steady, a small miracle after everything they'd survived. For a long while, Lauren listened to the world outside, the restless shifting of the stallion's hooves, the uneasy silence where wolves might still be lurking, the sigh of trees in the early morning darkness. Her hands ached from carrying, lifting, fighting, but she forced herself to keep moving, to keep tending the foal. She knew that letting her guard down even for a moment could spell disaster for them both. At some point before dawn, Lauren dozed off, her head nodding against her chest. The dream that claimed her was always the same. Her brother Danny's laughter echoing through the pines, a gunshot, then sudden silence. She jolted awake, heart pounding, sweat cold on her skin. It was only the cabin, the fire, the quiet. The foal blinked up at her, wide-eyed, and Lauren forced a steadying breath. Dawn crept through the grimy windows, turning the frost on the glass to shimmering silver. The world outside had changed. The stallion still patrolled the clearing, his coat wet with dew, but the wolf pack was gone, at least for now. The woods looked almost peaceful, the way they had when Lauren was a kid, before tragedy turned every shadow into something to fear. She checked the foal's wound, careful and methodical. The bleeding had slowed, but the leg was swollen and angry. Lauren cleaned it again, whispering, "Hang in there." As the foal shivered but didn't struggle, she recognized a kind of quiet bravery in the animal, a stubborn will to survive that matched her own. Lauren scrounged the cabin for anything useful. She found an old canteen, a chunk of salt, and a few crackers, stale but edible. The foal sniffed at the salt, licked it hesitantly, then accepted a few sips of water from Lauren's cupped palm. She smiled, just a little. "Yeah, that's right. You're a fighter, aren't you?" The fire had burned down to coals. Lauren stoked it back to life, feeding it with splinters and scraps. She leaned against the foal, feeling its warmth seep into her side. For the first time in hours, she allowed herself to rest, really rest, not just waiting for the next emergency. The air was filled with a heavy, aching silence, the kind that comes after crisis, when the only thing left to do is hold on and hope. Lauren's mind wandered back to Danny, his bright grin, the way he'd race her through these woods on wild ponies, always daring, always laughing. She'd tried for years to outrun that memory, to bury it beneath layers of toughness and work. Now, in the quiet, it hurt less. She realized she was fighting for this foal the way she wished someone had fought for her brother, for herself. Outside, the stallion watched the cabin, unmoving except for the flick of an ear. He looked like a piece of the wilderness itself, untamed, powerful, and utterly free. Lauren wondered if he understood what she'd done, what she was still doing. Did horses know gratitude? Or was it just the language of survival that bound them all together out here? As the morning brightened, Lauren gathered her courage and cracked open the door, keeping her body between the foal and whatever might be waiting outside. The stallion whickered softly, nostrils flaring as he caught her scent. The foal perked up at the sound, ears twitching, eyes suddenly alert. Lauren took a risk. She half-carried, half-guided the foal to the doorway, letting the sunlight wash over them both. The foal braced against her leg, trembling but curious. She stroked its neck, murmuring, "See? Safe. You're safe." For a while, Lauren simply watched the forest breathe. The stallion circled, pausing to meet her eyes. There was a silent exchange, an unspoken trust neither of them had asked for, but both desperately needed. The foal, sensing the stallion's presence, inched forward, its movements uncertain but hopeful. Lauren let them be, retreating to the cabin steps, keeping her distance. She knew enough about wild animals to respect their boundaries, even as she felt the ache of the bond forming between her and the foal. It nuzzled her hand, searching for reassurance, and Lauren found herself smiling despite the exhaustion. Somehow, in this place between worlds, they were both finding a way to heal. The hours passed quietly. Lauren checked her phone. Still no service. She used her field notebook to jot down every detail: the foal's progress, the stallion's behavior, even the direction the wolves had gone. It was habit, but also a lifeline. Writing kept her grounded, reminded her that she was still a ranger, still in control. By midday, the foal was stronger. It took a few wobbly steps on its own, tail flicking, head held high for the first time. Lauren praised it. "Good job. You've got this." And felt a flicker of pride that caught her by surprise. The stallion approached, sniffing the foal. Then Lauren, his breath warm and grassy. She didn't flinch. She let him inspect her, recognizing the immense trust this wild creature was offering. He could have left, taken the foal and disappeared into the trees. But he stayed, a silent sentinel at the edge of the clearing. As the sun climbed higher, Lauren knew they weren't out of danger. The wolves could return. The foal could still worsen. But for this moment, in the shelter of the old cabin, surrounded by the ghosts of her past and the wild heart of Wyoming, Lauren allowed herself to hope. She sat beside the foal, eyes on the horizon, and whispered to the wind, "We made it through the night. Now let's see what comes next." Lauren McKay leaned against the weathered doorframe of the cabin, arms folded, eyes following every twitch of the wild foal beside her. The air was sharp and golden, alive with the chorus of waking birds. The scent of pine and damp earth floated in, mixing with the smoky remnants of last night's fire. It could have been any ordinary morning in Wyoming, except for the nervous Mustang at her side, and the huge gray stallion still patrolling the edge of the clearing, nostrils flared, hooves stamping with a slow, measured rhythm. The foal, legs bandaged and trembling, had spent the night pressed close to Lauren, sometimes sleeping, sometimes jerking awake with a shiver. Each time Lauren had calmed it with a hand on its withers, murmuring nonsense words. Now, as daylight pushed away the terrors of night, the animal seemed brighter, head turning at every birdsong, ears flicking at the smallest sound. Lauren watched the stallion, her admiration growing. In all her years as a ranger, she'd never seen a wild Mustang act as protector like this. He stood between them and the forest, sometimes moving in tight circles, sometimes lifting his head to bugle a warning. It was as if he'd claimed both her and the foal, refusing to let anything harm them. After an hour or so, a movement caught Lauren's eye deeper in the woods, a flicker of color, a ripple of muscle and mane. She straightened, heart suddenly pounding. Out of the trees emerged two mares, wild and lean, their coats dappled by the morning sun. Behind them trotted another, then another, until the small herd gathered at the far side of the clearing, watching with wary, intelligent eyes. The stallion's posture shifted instantly. ears forward, tail high. He whinnied, a long musical call that echoed through the pines. The mares responded in kind, trotting closer but never breaking their formation. Lauren could feel the tension in the air, thick as summer storm clouds. Would they accept the foal back? Would they see her as a threat? She crouched beside the foal, whispering, "There they are, your family." And the young Mustang answered with a shaky nicker, struggling to its feet. Lauren bit her lip, uncertain. This was a moment she dreamed of witnessing, but it was also a test of everything she knew about the wild. She took a slow, deliberate step back, giving the foal space. The stallion eyed her but didn't charge. There was trust, hard-earned and fragile, hanging in the balance. The foal hobbled forward, each step a tiny victory. It paused, looking back at Lauren, then pushed onward, drawn by the scent and sound of its own kind. The nearest mare stretched her neck, nostrils flaring. A silent exchange seemed to pass between the herd and the foal, a language older than words, built on recognition and belonging. The foal reached the mares, head lowered in a gesture of humility and hope. One of the mares sniffed its wounds, then nuzzled its mane, gentle and reassuring. The others circled around, touching noses, welcoming it home. Lauren's heart clenched. There was joy, sharp and aching, mingled with a surprising sadness. She'd fought so hard to save the foal, to protect it from everything that wanted to claim it. But now she had to let go. The stallion trotted over, snorting softly at Lauren as if to say, "Thank you," before turning his attention fully to the reunited herd. They clustered around the foal, creating a living barrier of muscle and resolve. The stallion glanced back at Lauren, holding her gaze for a long, silent moment before lowering his head in what felt like an ancient gesture of gratitude. Lauren wiped her eyes, blinking away the sudden blur. She found herself laughing softly. "Just look at you," she whispered, "proud and free. That's how it's supposed to be." She remained on the porch, keeping a respectful distance, her ranger's instincts telling her not to interfere. The mares tested the foal's strength, gently nudging it, pushing it to walk. The foal wobbled but held its ground, leaning against its mother when it stumbled. Lauren tracked every movement, making notes in her battered field book. Foal accepted by herd. Herd appears healthy, stallion highly protective, remarkable display of social cohesion. She couldn't help but feel a twinge of loss. The foal, who'd trusted her with its fear and pain, now belonged to the wild again. Lauren had been a bridge, nothing more. That realization stung, but it also healed something inside her. She remembered the helplessness of losing her brother, the guilt of not being able to save him. This time, at least, she'd done enough. The sun climbed higher. Lauren rummaged in her pack for her binoculars, scanning the tree line for any sign of wolves or poachers. The stallion seemed to sense her vigilance. He stationed himself on a small rise, head held high, watching both the herd and the woods beyond. Lauren admired his courage and the quiet wisdom that came with it. As the day wore on, Lauren gathered herbs and water for the foal, leaving her offerings just inside the clearing. The mares accepted her gifts, sniffing her hand, their eyes calm and knowing. Lauren felt accepted, in a small way, by the wild, a kind of belonging she'd never imagined possible. She sat on the porch, sipping lukewarm coffee, and watched the herd. The foal grazed near its mother, occasionally glancing at Lauren as if to say, "I remember you. Thank you." Lauren smiled, heart full and aching. In that quiet, sunlit morning, She felt peace settle over her for the first time in years. She understood now that trust was a gift, not a given, and that the wild would only ever share itself with those who respected its boundaries. As dusk approached, Lauren promised herself she'd stay nearby, watch over the herd as long as she was needed. But she also knew, deep down, that she would have to let go of the foal, of her guilt, of the idea that she could save everything she loved. For now, it was enough just to witness, to be present for a healing that belonged to the land as much as it did to her. The wild had accepted her, if only for a moment. That was more than she'd ever dared hope. Lauren's world settled into a fragile peace in the days that followed the foal's return to the herd. Each morning she watched the small Mustang limp but determined, shadowed closely by its mother and the stallion, who never let the herd drift too far from the safety of the old cabin. The wild beauty of their loyalty struck Lauren again and again. It was the same fierce protectiveness she had tried to show her own family, the same aching hope she now dared to feel for herself. But the mountains didn't rest, and neither did danger. On the third morning, as Lauren refilled her canteen by a trickling creek, she caught the scent of cigarette smoke, a sharp, unnatural odor that didn't belong. Her ranger's senses flared. She crouched low, scanning the undergrowth. There, impressions in the soft mud, too large for deer, the tread of heavy boots. Farther along, a soda can crushed beneath a pine bough. Then something worse, a steel-jawed trap, half buried beneath leaves, its teeth stained with old blood. Lauren's breath caught. Poachers. Not the amateur type. These were men who knew what they were doing, leaving almost no trace, moving with purpose. She'd heard rumors all season. Shadowy trucks on back roads, rare Mustangs vanishing from known herds, a spike in illegal horse trading just over the border. Now the threat was here, at her door. Her stomach twisted. She returned to the clearing, eyes sweeping the tree line for movement. The herd grazed quietly, but the stallion's ears flicked at every distant sound. Lauren kept her rifle close, boots silent on the moss. She doubled back to mark every trap she could find, destroying them with a rock when possible, noting their locations in her field book for the authorities. Late that afternoon, she heard a metallic clatter, hoof against steel. Her heart leapt into her throat. Racing through the trees, she found one of the mares caught in a snare, blood streaming from a gash above her hoof. The stallion reared and screamed as Lauren approached, but she spoke softly, hands raised. "Easy. I'm here to help," until he grudgingly allowed her close. She freed the mare, bandaged the wound with strips from her shirt, then spent an hour brushing the herd with her presence, showing she meant no harm. The bond between Lauren and the Mustangs deepened. The stallion, recognizing her efforts, no longer shied away when she drew near. He allowed her to check the foal's wound each morning, nuzzling Lauren's pockets for treats and watching her with wary, thoughtful eyes. The foal, braver now, sometimes followed Lauren around the edge of the clearing, imitating her steps, its limp barely noticeable after days of careful tending. Yet the tension in the air never eased. Each night, Lauren heard trucks rumbling on distant ridges, headlights flickering through the trees. She saw shadows moving at the edges of her lantern's light, men in camo slipping between rocks, rifles slung over their shoulders, voices low and urgent. She slept little, one hand always on her rifle, the other resting protectively near the foal. On the fifth night, danger struck without warning. The sky was heavy with clouds, moonlight smothered, the only sounds the soft breathing of the herd and the wind through the pines. Lauren sat by a dying fire, field notebook in her lap, when a distant snap jolted her awake. A twig, then the soft hiss of footsteps. She rose, silent, scanning the darkness. A sudden commotion erupted. Horses screaming, hooves pounding. Lauren ran, heart racing. In the clearing, two poachers, faces masked, eyes cold, were trying to rope the stallion and the foal. The stallion fought like a demon, biting, kicking, his eyes wild with fury. The foal staggered, tangled in a crude lasso, blood seeping from reopened wounds. Lauren didn't think. She charged into the fray, swinging a branch at the first poacher's head. Get away, knocking him sprawling. The second turned, aiming a flashlight and a tranquilizer gun at Lauren, but she ducked behind the stallion, shoving the foal free with her shoulder. The herd scattered in panic, but Lauren grabbed the foal's halter, whispering, "Come on, come on," as they bolted into the woods. Behind her, the stallion lunged, snapping the rope, hooves thundering as he drove the poachers back. Lauren heard curses, a gunshot cracking the night, but she kept moving, dragging the foal through brambles, sweat and blood mingling on her arms. The foal, terrified but trusting, limped at her side, urged on by Lauren's voice and the distant calls of its family. The woods became a maze, shadows twisting, every root a potential trap. Lauren doubled back, weaving through fallen logs, whispering directions to the foal, this way, almost there, until they burst into a shallow ravine, hearts pounding. Behind them, the poachers crashed through the trees, but the stallion was there, leading a decoy charge that drew the men off in another direction, his massive body a blur of gray and power. Lauren and the foal crouched in the darkness, listening to the chaos fade. Her breath shook, her arms ached, but she kept a firm grip on the foal, promising, "You're safe now. I won't let them take you." When dawn finally broke, Lauren led the foal back to the herd, who greeted them with relief and anxious nickers. The stallion, sides heaving, circled Lauren, snorting as if to say, "Well done." And Lauren, exhausted, simply nodded. The bond between her and the Mustangs was stronger than ever, forged in the fire of a night they'd all barely survived. Lauren knew the threat hadn't passed, but for now, they had won another day. Lauren woke to the cold slap of morning and the bitter ache of fatigue in every muscle. The forest felt restless, too still, too charged, like the world itself was holding its breath. She moved quietly through the undergrowth, every sense tuned to the faintest sound. Overhead, dark clouds gathered, promising rain and trouble. The Mustangs grazed near the stream, the foal sticking close to its mother, the stallion ever watchful at the herd's edge. Lauren had barely finished checking the foal's wound. Thankfully, no new bleeding, when the quiet shattered. The distant roar of engines rolled through the pines, rough and urgent, followed by the sharp crack of branches under heavy wheels. She crouched, heart racing, watching as 3 ATVs broke through the trees on the far ridge. Each bore a rider in camo, faces hidden behind bandanas and sunglasses. Slung across their backs were rifles and, worse, the long black barrels of tranquilizer guns. Panic surged through the herd. The mares bunched tight, the foal squealing. The stallion reared, trumpeting a warning. Lauren recognized the lead poacher, a broad-shouldered man with a yellow patch on his jacket, the same one who'd tried to rope the foal days earlier. This time, they were coming with a plan. Lauren's mind raced. She knew these woods like the lines of her own palm. She could use that. Ducking behind a spruce, she pulled out her field radio. Still nothing but static. Too deep in the wild for help to come soon enough. She would have to outthink and outmaneuver the poachers alone. The ATVs swept into the clearing, engines snarling. The poachers shouted, herding the Mustangs toward the ravine. One of the men fired a tranquilizer dart, missing by inches as the stallion wheeled and bolted, leading the herd into the trees. Lauren ran in the opposite direction, skirting the clearing's edge, searching for a way to turn the land itself into a weapon. She remembered a narrow game trail leading into a dense thicket of chokecherry and fallen logs, a place where machines would struggle but hooves could pass. Sprinting, she waved her arms, shouting, "This way!" her voice sharp, desperate. The foal saw her and veered in her direction, the mares and the stallion following, hooves thundering behind her. A dart zipped past Lauren's head, lodging in the bark inches away. She ducked, urging the horses forward. Behind them the poachers split up, two on foot, one circling wide on an ATV, engine howling. Lauren's heart hammered as she ran, snapping branches, pushing through tangles of thorns. She found the trail and dived in, leading the Mustangs through the tightest gaps, whispering, "Keep moving, stay close," over and over. The stallion stayed at the rear, biting and snapping at any horse that lagged, driving the herd with terrifying authority. The poachers weren't far behind. Lauren could hear their curses, the slap of boots on wet leaves, the mechanical snarl of the ATV as it crashed through undergrowth. She grabbed a broken branch and dragged it across the trail, knocking loose a pile of old stones that tumbled down, blocking the path. The ATV skidded to a stop, the rider shouting in frustration. Lauren smiled grimly. One small victory. But the chase was far from over. A sudden yelp split the air. The foal had stumbled, tripping over a root, collapsing in the mud. Lauren whirled, dropping to her knees at its side. The herd pressed close, eyes wild, nostrils flaring. Lauren checked the foal's leg, still healing, but now twisted and sore, the old wound reopened, blood pooling in the dirt. The stallion pawed the ground, torn between flight and defense. The mares crowded around, shielding the foal from view. Lauren knew time was running out. The poachers' voices were growing louder, their footsteps crashing closer. She did the only thing she could. She scooped the foal into her arms, muscles screaming with the effort, and staggered off the trail, deeper into the pines. The foal whimpered, its breath hot on her neck. But Lauren pushed on, following a dry stream bed she remembered from her childhood. A hidden route that cut under an old rock overhang. Behind them, the stallion roared his challenge. Lauren glanced back to see the big Mustang charge the lead poacher, hooves flashing, teeth bared. The man fell hard, dropping his dart gun. The stallion wheeled, herding the other horses after Lauren, leading them in a tight circle through the brush. The poachers tried to regroup, but the maze of fallen trees and thorny scrub slowed them. Lauren pressed on, every step agony. The foal grew heavier by the minute, its fear palpable, but she wouldn't let go. Not now. She found a shallow cave beneath a shelf of granite, just big enough for herself and the foal. They crouched inside, breath mingling, hearts pounding in sync. She risked a glance outside. The poachers had abandoned the ATV, forced to hunt on foot now, their voices echoing through the trees. One of them cursed. "She's got to be here somewhere," while another scanned the ground, searching for tracks. The stallion led the remaining herd in a series of feints, darting in and out of view, drawing the poachers further from the stream bed. Lauren watched, amazed at the wild intelligence of the animal, how he risked himself, again and again, for his family, and impossibly, for her. Minutes stretched, thick with fear. Rain began to fall, heavy and cold, turning the world to mist and shadows. Lauren checked the foal's leg, wrapping it as best she could with torn strips from her shirt. The animal whimpered, but calmed at her touch, eyes trusting, brave. Outside, a crash. One of the poachers slipped in the mud, cursing. The stallion trumpeted victory and vanished into the mist. Lauren took her chance. With the foal leaning on her, she hurried along the stream bed, following the sound of the herd's hooves until, at last, they broke into a meadow beyond the reach of the poachers' guns. The herd reunited, pressing around Lauren and the foal in a living shield. The stallion reared, mane wild in the storm, and Lauren felt a surge of hope. Tired, battered, but alive. She'd risked everything, and the Mustangs had risked themselves for her in turn. They were not out of danger, but for now, they had escaped, together, wilder and stronger than ever before. Lightning flickered at the horizon, thunder rumbling through the ancient Wyoming pines. Lauren pressed her palm to the foal's trembling shoulder, feeling its heartbeat hammer against her skin. The rain was relentless now, icy sheets that soaked through her clothes, plastering her hair to her head, turning the forest floor into a churning river of mud and roots. The herd clustered around her in the exposed meadow, sides heaving, eyes wide. Above them, the slate-gray stallion pawed at the ground, his body bristling with a wild electricity that matched the coming storm. The poachers regrouped at the edge of the trees, flashlights sweeping through the downpour, dark shapes shifting between lightning bursts. Lauren's mind raced, searching for options. They were boxed in. Behind them, the meadow narrowed to a rocky outcrop, a wall of stone and scrub that offered only a thin ledge for escape. Ahead, the poachers fanned out, guns ready, voices echoing, "Don't let 'em get away! We get the stallion and the foal, the rest are just bonus!" Lauren's hands shook, but not from cold. She glanced at the foal, muddy, bleeding, but stubbornly upright. Its mother pressed close, blocking the wind, as if shielding her child from more than just the elements. The stallion came to Lauren's side, breath steaming, nostrils flared. For a moment, their eyes met. She felt a wild surge of courage, not just her own, but the animals', like the land itself had chosen to fight back. The poachers advanced, slow and careful, feet slipping in the mud. One fired a warning shot into the air, "Get back, move, and you're done." But the herd held its ground, hooves stamping. Lauren saw their plan. They meant to drive the Mustangs into the rocks, trap them, and pick off the foal and stallion at close range. Her fingers closed around the emergency flare in her jacket pocket, the last one she had. She knew she needed to buy time, to signal for help, even if rescue was still miles and hours away. She made her choice in an instant. Whispering, "Stay here." She slipped away from the foal, keeping low, moving through the herd's sheltering bodies toward the rocky ledge. The storm broke in full, rain blinding, thunder rolling over the hills. The poachers hesitated, raising their rifles, distracted for a split second by a flash of lightning. Lauren leaped onto the rocks, pulling the cap from the flare. She struck it. Brilliant red fire seared the darkness, casting wild shadows on every face. She waved it high, yelling, "Over here! Help!" as loud as her voice would carry. For a split second, everyone froze. The poachers blinded by the flare, the horses startled, Lauren's silhouette painted crimson atop the outcrop. Then chaos erupted. The stallion screamed, surging forward with primal fury, leading a charge directly into the heart of the poachers' line. The herd followed, a living tide of muscle and thunder. Lauren's heart soared. Go, go, as the Mustangs broke through the men, scattering them in every direction. Shots rang out. Darts flew past Lauren's head, one burying itself in her sleeve, another in the rocky ground. The poachers, panicked and off balance, stumbled in the mud. The stallion reared, hooves flashing dangerously close to a poacher's chest, forcing him to dive aside. The mares shielded the foal, flanking Lauren as she dropped from the rocks and sprinted back to the herd's side. Behind her, she heard the distant wail of a siren, so faint she almost thought she'd imagined it. But then another, closer. Someone had seen the flare. Backup was coming. Lauren shouted, "Rangers, over here!" and fired another warning shot into the air for good measure. The poachers tried to regroup, but the stallion would not let up. He chased one man through the trees, his fury unmatched, while another staggered into the open and was promptly tackled by a uniformed ranger, shotgun drawn. The rain blurred the world, but Lauren could make out the shapes. More rangers spilling from the tree line, yelling commands, guns raised, faces grim with determination. The fight didn't last long. Outnumbered and caught by surprise, the poachers surrendered one by one, dropping their weapons, hands raised. The rangers cuffed them quickly, dragging them from the mud. Lauren collapsed to her knees, exhausted, the foal pressing close to her, its body shaking but alive. A young ranger, a woman with freckles and a wild mane of red hair, knelt beside Lauren, checking her for wounds. Lauren shook her head, breathless. The horses, the herd. But the ranger just smiled, nodding at the sight of the Mustangs clustered together, battered but whole. The storm eased, rain thinning to a gentle drizzle. Lauren struggled to her feet, heart pounding with the aftershocks of terror and adrenaline. She made her way to the stallion, who stood apart, head high, chest heaving. She pressed her forehead to his neck, whispering, "You saved us. We did it." The foal limped to Lauren's side, resting its head in her lap. The mares gathered around, their bodies a warm, living circle of trust. The rangers approached, keeping a respectful distance, as Lauren inspected the foal's wound, reopened but not deep. She pressed a clean bandage to it, hands gentle, voice soft. "It's over. You're safe." As dawn broke over the soaked Wyoming pines, Lauren and the Mustangs stood victorious. The poachers were gone, their threats scattered by courage, rain, and the relentless spirit of the wild. Lauren closed her eyes, letting the relief wash over her. She had risked everything, and the wild had answered. For the first time in years, she felt the burden of old grief begin to ease. She looked at the stallion and the foal, and she smiled. In saving them, she had saved something inside herself, something she thought she'd lost to the darkness, now shining again in the gray light of a new day. When the sun finally rose over the soaked Wyoming forest, it washed the world in a gentle gold that felt almost like forgiveness. The storm had passed. The land was quiet now, birds cautiously testing their voices, droplets shining on every blade of grass, the sharp tang of rain and pine thick in the air. Lauren stood at the edge of the meadow, boots caked with mud, exhaustion heavy in her bones. She watched as the rangers loaded the captured poachers into their trucks, the authorities' voices muffled by the soft hush that follows a night of chaos. The Mustangs clustered together, steam rising from their damp backs. The foal was safe, pressed between its mother and the big slate-gray stallion who had become both guardian and legend. Lauren knelt, her hands gentle on the foal's neck as she checked the wound, scabbed over, swollen but no longer bleeding. The animal flinched, then leaned into her touch, its trust unspoken but profound. One by one, the rangers came to thank Lauren. There was awe in their eyes. She'd faced down poachers, survived wolves and a raging storm, and stood between the wild and those who would destroy it. News of the night's ordeal traveled quickly, and more officials arrived. Wildlife officers, conservationists, even a local journalist who snapped a photo of Lauren beside the stallion, her expression both proud and deeply tired. But as the clearing filled with people, Lauren felt a growing ache in her chest. She looked at the herd, especially the foal, now moving with an awkward but undeniable strength, and realized the time had come to let the wild be wild. She had done her part. To keep clinging would be a kind of captivity. The lesson she'd learned through pain and perseverance was simple but hard. Sometimes love meant letting go. She stood, wiping her muddy hands on her jeans. The stallion watched her, amber eyes unreadable. Lauren met his gaze, feeling the weight of all they'd survived together. There was a gratitude in that look, something ancient, almost sacred. She took a slow step back, then another, creating space between herself and the herd. The foal whickered, taking a hesitant step toward her, then paused as its mother blocked the way. The mares formed a living barrier, as if to say, "You've helped enough. Now let us heal on our own terms." Lauren understood, though it stung. She bowed her head in respect, and the stallion tossed his mane, stamping his hoof in a farewell salute. A hush settled as the herd moved, first slowly, then with growing confidence. The stallion led the way, head high, the foal trotting close behind, mares flanking them on every side. They crossed the meadow and vanished into the pines, their bodies turning to dappled shadows in the morning sun. Lauren watched until the last swish of a tail, the last glint of a mane, was gone. She stood alone, breath misting in the air. The forest seemed emptier without them, but also bigger, full of new possibility. She felt a pang of loss, sharper than she'd expected. The bond she'd forged with the foal, the trust and fear, the hope and shared survival, wasn't something she could carry back into her ordinary life. It belonged to the wild now, woven into the song of these woods. Lauren turned back to the rangers, who waited with questions and gratitude. She answered what she could, insisting that the real heroes were the Mustangs themselves. She showed them where to find the poachers' traps, offered advice on how to better protect the area, and accepted their praise with humility. But her heart was already drifting away, following the horses into the endless forest. Later that afternoon, as the rangers packed up and the news crews retreated, Lauren returned to the old cabin one last time. She gathered her few belongings, a battered field notebook, her father's pocket knife, the empty flare canister. On the porch, she sat in silence, watching the wind bend the grasses and the clouds scud across the endless Wyoming sky. A feeling of transformation settled on her. The ache of her brother's loss was still there, a scar she would always carry, but it no longer owned her. She thought of the foal's first terrified night, its desperate will to survive, the stallion's refusal to abandon the weak, and her own willingness to risk everything. The wild had given her a second chance, a place to lay down her grief and stand again in the light. Evening approached, painting the forest in bands of purple and fire. Lauren stood and shouldered her pack. Before she left, she carved a small message into the cabin's porch rail, initials and a simple phrase, "Let the wild be wild." It was all she could offer, a promise to herself and to the land she loved. As she walked away from the cabin, she paused at the edge of the woods. There, between two old aspens, she caught a final glimpse of movement. Just a flick of gray, a flash of chestnut and white. A raised head watching her from the deepening dusk. It was the stallion, and beside him, the foal, taller now, eyes bright with the knowledge of survival. For a heartbeat, the world seemed to hold its breath. Then they turned and melted into the twilight. Lauren smiled through tears she didn't bother to wipe away. The wild had healed, and so had she. Each letting go, each moving forward, both forever changed. When news of her rescue spread, Lauren's story lit up conservation circles across the state. She was hailed as a hero, a symbol of what one person could do when they refused to back down. But in her heart, she knew the truth. The wild didn't need a savior. It needed a witness, a protector, someone who understood the value of freedom and the courage it took to let go. The Wyoming wind carried her promise into the open sky, and Lauren McKay, ranger, survivor, friend to the wild, turned toward home, forever marked by the memory of a Mustang foal and the morning she learned to let go. In the weeks that followed the storm, Lauren McKay found herself back at her small cabin on the edge of the Wyoming wilderness. But everything had changed. The quiet forest she once knew felt different, charged with new purpose, alive with the memory of a wild Mustang foal's struggle and survival. Her days shifted from endless patrols to a mission that went beyond law enforcement. She was now a voice for the wild, a bridge between human hearts and the untamed land. Lauren's story began to ripple out, first among local conservationists and wildlife agencies, then through schools, community groups, and even national media. Invitations arrived to speak, to share, to inspire. Lauren spoke honestly about fear and courage, about loss and hope, about the powerful bond that can form between humans and animals when respect is earned, not demanded. At a packed auditorium in Cheyenne, she stood before a crowd of students, rangers, and animal lovers. The spotlight warmed her skin as she told them about the foal, the stallion, and the night when wolves and poachers closed in. She didn't shy away from the darkest moments, the desperation, the near failures, the sting of having to let go. But she also spoke of the beauty, the trust earned, the wild heart of Wyoming, and the strength found in compassion. The greatest act, Lauren told them, voice steady, was not saving that foal from the wild. It was honoring its right to be wild. Sometimes, saving a life means letting it go free. The room was silent, the lesson sinking in deeper than any textbook could teach. Lauren helped launch a new wild horse protection program, working with wildlife officials to improve monitoring, to remove traps and snares, and to educate rural communities about the importance of Mustangs. She mentored young rangers, teaching them not only how to track and protect animals, but how to listen to the land, to the creatures, and to their own instincts. Her nights were still restless sometimes. Memories of her brother Danny, the accident, the silence that followed, surfaced unexpectedly. But instead of shutting down, Lauren faced her grief with the same courage she'd shown in the forest. She wrote in her journal, poured her heart into letters, and found solace in knowing that her actions, however small, made a difference. She realized her story was part of something larger, a shared responsibility to the land and its creatures, to future generations who might one day roam these woods free. The wild was fragile, yes, but also resilient, alive with possibility if people chose to stand up for it. Lauren's relationship with nature deepened beyond duty. It became a partnership. She understood that connection required humility and patience, that every living thing deserved respect. She often walked the trails alone, listening, not just for poachers or dangers, but for the whispers of the forest, the rustle of hooves, the soft call of a distant Mustang. Years later, Lauren could still feel the echo of that first night, the desperation, the trust, the wild spirit that refused to be broken. She sometimes glimpsed a familiar shadow on the forest edge, a gray stallion leading a herd with a scarred foal close behind. It was a living reminder that every act of courage and kindness leaves a mark, a legacy written not in words, but in the rhythm of the land. Lauren's story inspired many to rethink their relationship with nature, to see themselves not as conquerors, but as stewards, caretakers of something far greater than any one person. She urged others to find their own courage, to stand for what's right, even when it's hard, even when the wild seems too vast to protect. At the heart of it all, Lauren knew this truth. True strength lies not in control or domination, but in empathy, resilience, and the willingness to release what we love back into the wild. The future of the American West depends on ordinary people making extraordinary, compassionate choices, again and again. She spoke often of the foal and stallion, of the night they fought side by side against wolves and men, of the day she learned to let go. And in those stories, she passed down a legacy, a new legend of Wyoming, where saving a life sometimes means knowing when to say goodbye. Years had passed since that fateful summer when Lauren McKay had carried a wounded Mustang foal through the Wyoming wilderness, defying wolves, poachers, and a storm to protect a fragile life that embodied wild freedom. But the memory of that night remained as vivid and raw as ever, etched deep in her heart and soul. Lauren had returned to her ranger duties, but now with a new purpose that colored every step she took on the forest trails. She was no longer just a guardian of the land. She was a storyteller, a teacher, a symbol of resilience and compassion in a world too often defined by conflict between man and nature. On quiet mornings, when the sun spilled gold through the towering pines, and the air held the crisp scent of earth and growth, Lauren would find herself riding the forest's edge, her horse steady beneath her, eyes scanning the horizon. Sometimes, just beyond the bend, she would catch a glimpse, a flash of gray, a familiar scar, a powerful figure moving like a shadow through the trees. It was the stallion, stronger now, older, leading his own herd with quiet authority. And beside him, a Mustang with the same stubborn spirit and fire in her eyes, the foal, grown, bearing the marks of survival and freedom. Lauren's heart would swell. That bond they had forged in a crucible of danger and trust was real and enduring. It was proof that the wild was not just a place, but a living legacy, woven through every choice, every act of courage, every moment of compassion. She thought often about the lessons learned on that journey. True strength, she realized, was not the ability to dominate or control, but the empathy to understand another's struggle, the resilience to face hardship without losing hope, and the courage to release what you love back into the wild, free and whole. Lauren's story had become part of the land's fabric, a legend passed down through local communities and conservation groups. It reminded all who heard it that saving a life sometimes means letting it go, and that the future of the American West depended on ordinary people making extraordinary, compassionate choices, again and again. She continued her work with the Wild Horse Protection Program, mentoring young rangers, sharing not just techniques and protocols, but the deeper wisdom of listening to the animals, to the land, and to one's own heart. Her efforts helped strengthen laws against poaching, expanded habitat protections, and fostered a new respect for the Mustang herds that had long been part of Wyoming's soul. But beyond all the accolades and progress, Lauren treasured the quiet moments. The soft nicker of a Mustang greeting her on a trail, the rush of wind through the pines, the simple, enduring knowledge that she was part of something greater. As she sat by a campfire one cool evening, watching stars ignite the sky, Lauren whispered a thank you to the wild, for the foal, for the stallion, for the second chance at life they had given her. The wild had saved her as much as she had saved it, and in that sacred exchange, the true meaning of courage and love lived on, beyond the forest, beyond the mountains, carried in the hearts of all who dared to protect what was wild and free.